the Chi-Town experience on the flight. Let me go tune in to KIEQ on the mic. He gon' make sure we get our news and highlights. When you get on YouTube, you better hit the like.
The Chicago Bears just got not such great news and will now have to alter their offseason plans just a little bit. Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of KIEQ on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. As always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Bears fans, so we have some big news in the NFL world, and in regard to the Chicago Bears, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be franchise tagging star guard Trey Smith, which will now mean that he'll be off the table for the Chicago Bears when free agency opens up next month. And obviously, this is a huge blow for Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears. A lot of us assume that Trey Smith would have been the number one target for Ryan Poles and the Bears going into the offseason. We have a massive need on the offensive line, especially when you look at the interior of the Chicago Bears offensive line. But now the Kansas City Chiefs are expected to franchise tag Trey Smith, and that number will be at around $24 million for next year. And it's just it sucks, to say the least, right? But it is the business of the NFL. The franchise tag is there to really protect teams and give them more time to reach a long-term deal with any player of your choosing. And obviously, this tells you how the Chiefs feel about their guard. He has been, once again, the forefront of really making that offensive line great, giving Patrick Mahomes enough time to throw the football. And, a lot of Bears fans, including myself, were excited for the idea of Trey Smith on this offensive line. But now Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears will now have to pivot, and they were prepared for the scenario. We're not sitting here saying, hey, it was Trey Smith or nothing. I am pretty sure Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears have a plan B. But now let's talk about how will the Chicago Bears pivot, because, losing out on Trey Smith is both good and bad news. The bad news that the Chicago Bears have a massive need on the offensive line once again, especially on the interior of the offensive line. When you look at the interior offensive line options currently on the Chicago Bears, the only one that is currently on the roster stating back to last year is Ryan Bates. The rest of them, the other three guys, are just reserved future contract for the Chicago Bears. So obviously Ryan Poles needs some more interior offensive linemen and needs to upgrade that position group going into the offseason. So that's obviously the bad news of losing out on a guy like Trey Smith, because he would have been an instant upgrade for Ryan Poles and this Bears offensive line. He has a connection with Darnell Wright as they played together back at their Tennessee days. He has a connection with Ryan Poles and Eric Bieniemy dating back to their Kansas City Chiefs days. So it made all the sense in the world for Trey Smith to be a Chicago Bear. And of course, the Chicago Bears would have been able to afford Trey Smith with now having $78 million in cap space going into this offseason, which is the fourth most in the National Football League. The good news is Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears have other options, to really upgrade this offensive line going into the offseason, not only via free agency, but also the NFL draft as well. Of course, Trey Smith was the cream of the crop. Everyone wanted that guy on their football team. But at the same time, there's other options that Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears can now look at to upgrade that position group. And they have the resources to do so. So on today's episode of KIEQ on the Mic, let's look at some other options, right? Now the Bears have to pivot, right? And of course, the Bears are now saving a lot of money by not having to pay Trey Smith. We all know that he was going to get a massive contract to make him probably the richest guard in NFL history, and that would have probably came at around $25 million per year. But now when you're looking at the other option, these options are also very intriguing options for the Chicago Bears. These options will also allow the Chicago Bears to bolster the offensive line, and it won't cost them $25 million per year to sign any of these guys. So I think first and foremost, with the news of the Kansas City Chiefs franchising Trey Smith, I think Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears are now going to pivot first and foremost at a guy like Drew Dalman, the current center of the Atlanta Falcons. He was another intriguing option. We've also had scenarios where we thought the Bears could be interested in landing Drew Dalman and Trey Smith together in one offseason. But now I think since Trey Smith is off the table for the Chicago Bears, the Bears can make their sole focus on center Drew Dalman. Of course, Dalman's not going to cost the Chicago Bears a whole lot of money. I'm not talking about $25 million per year. He's still going to probably get around $14 to $15 million. But now with not landing a guy like Trey Smith and paying $25 million per year, they will be able to go out and make their sole focus on center Drew Dalman. I know Ben Johnson this week at the NFL Combine made it very clear that he wants to upgrade the center position. He understands that's probably one of the most important positions on the offensive line other than the left tackle spot. I think the Chicago Bears will now make a huge swing at center Drew Dalman in free agency. And then looking at a guy like Evan Brown. We've talked about Evan Brown as well. He's a guard / center, very versatile. He could play the center spot. He could play the guard spot as well. He has a connection with Ben Johnson dating back to his Detroit Lions days back in 2021. He makes a whole lot of sense as well to upgrade the interior of this offensive line. And once again, you could probably get him for cheap, around $5 to $8 million per year. And then, of course, guard Kevin Zittler as well. I'm a guy that is aging. He's 34 years old, but he's still highly productive, and he's also a durable player and also has a strong connection with Ben Johnson dating back to his Detroit Lions days. So I think if you go into free agency and say, hey, look, we're going to go out and get Drew Dalman. We're going to go get guard Evan Brown. We're going to get guard Kevin Zittler. Obviously, Kevin Zittler is 34 years old. You go into the NFL draft and still draft offensive linemen early to develop behind Kevin Zittler. I still think you can upgrade and bolster this offensive line unit here in Chicago without landing a guy like Trey Smith. So all hope is not lost for the Chicago Bears. Obviously, it's a huge loss hearing about not landing Trey Smith, but the Bears still have options out there. And of course, these are just the options that are coming on the top of my head. Drew Dalman, Evan Brown, Kevin Zittler. I know Ryan Kelly of the Indianapolis Colts is also an option that Chicago Bears fans have been looking at. Jonah Jackson is obviously, requested, and the Rams are seeking a trade for him, which I'm not really interested in. He has a lot of injury history. I know a lot of Chicago Bears fans are looking at him, but for me personally, I think Drew Dalman, Evan Brown, Kevin Zittler, Ryan Kelly, maybe Mekhi Becton as well, are names that the Chicago Bears will circle going into this offseason. And then obviously going into the NFL draft, you have guys like Armand Membu, right, from Missouri, Will Campbell, the tackle at LSU, Kelvin Banks Jr. You have Gray Zabel as well, Tyler Booker, the guard out of Alabama. So all hope is not lost for Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears to build a quality offensive line here in Chicago. It's still a massive need. They took a massive hit by losing out on Trey Smith, but now they just have to pivot, and trust me, I know Ryan Poles, Ben Johnson, and the Chicago Bears have a plan B, and it wouldn't shock me at all if their plan B was now to go super hard at Drew Dalman, the center of currently the Atlanta Falcons. So Bears fans, let me know your feelings of the Kansas City Chiefs franchise tagging Trey Smith. And now that Trey Smith is off the table, what would you do if you're GM Ryan Poles, and who would you target going into this offseason? Some more good news for the Chicago Bears and the rest of the National Football League today. According to Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, the NFL and the NFLPA have agreed to a 2025 salary cap of $279.2 million per club, another record high, increasing by almost $24 million from last year. Obviously, with this increase, that puts the Chicago Bears at $78.85 million, so almost $79 million going into this offseason, which is fourth most in the National Football League. So that is a great number for Ryan Poles and the Bears as they look to upgrade the roster. Once again, of course, Ryan Poles does not have to stop there. The Bears can still look to restructure contracts, make more cuts on this roster, etc., to give them even more cap space, which is I expect Ryan Poles to do. We have talked about many of those scenarios on past podcasts right here on KIEQ on the mic. And once again, just like we talked about, he's going to go into this offseason trying to upgrade the interior of this offensive line. I would also love him to see invest in the defensive line as well, maybe adding a guy like Joshua or Khalil Mack. And then obviously just going into the NFL draft, focusing on the trenches as well. The Bears need to upgrade the trenches. You win and lose in the trenches. Look what the Philadelphia Eagles did to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So that's going to be a main focus for Ben Johnson, Ryan Poles, and the Chicago Bears. And one last thing before I let you guys go on today's episode of KIEQ on the Mic. Ryan Poles also spoke about a possible trade back in the NFL draft. Just basically insinuating that it could be beneficial for the Chicago Bears to trade out of number 10. I know a lot of Chicago Bears fans agree. Once again, I gave you guys a trade scenario on yesterday's episode of KIEQ on the Mic, trading back with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, adding 2 second-round picks, 1 in this year's NFL draft and 1 in the 2026 NFL draft. It would give the Chicago Bears 3 second-round picks in this year's 2025 NFL draft, and then the Chicago Bears can really go in and address many areas of need, getting a good quality offensive lineman, even double down the offensive lineman. You can double down at defensive lineman if you want to, adding to the running back position by adding Caleb Johnson, maybe Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, among others, right? And maybe even adding a safety as well to the Chicago Bears roster. So I think when push comes to shove, and when you look at, the bulk of this draft and where it's really, really good at, you're looking at defensive lineman and running back, and that is some areas of need that the Chicago Bears are trying to address on this roster. So I think it's going to be beneficial for the Chicago Bears to trade back from number 10, add another second-round pick. I'm going to really address many areas of needs on this roster. So as we get closer, and once again, Ryan Poles said they're still going through, the informative stage, trying to get through the NFL Combine. And once they get done with the Combine, they will have a better idea of what they kind of want to do in the NFL Draft. But I think when push comes to shove, I could definitely see Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears trading back and adding some draft capital, not only this year and next year, and adding many different areas of need in the 2025 NFL Draft. But as always, Bears fans, make sure you guys continue to hit the subscribe button and the notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of KIEQ on the Mic with every single Bears that you know. But other than that, be back for all new Bears podcasts right here on KIEQ on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and as always, bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't KIEQ on the Mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't KIEQ on the Mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't KIEQ on the